explorer of good problems and solver of hard ones. That's how Ankush describes himself. My guest on the podcast today made one of the interesting resets in his life that many just think about. After a successful career stint in banking and tech sector where he led design engineering and customer experience, he left that cushy job to teach at prestigious NUS, National University of Singapore. Join us as we speak with him why he made this bold move and what prompted that decision. Welcome, Ankush.
Thanks so much, Asta. That was a lot for me to also digest. I was almost thinking we're talking to someone else.
No, I mean, honestly, when I first heard about your reset, I was like, this is really interesting.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be talking to you and be on your podcast too.
Great. So, can you share a little bit about your background, your corporate career before making this shift?
Sure. So I won't try to bore anyone in the beginning itself. So I'll keep it short to start off with. I did engineering in electronics and communication. I went to one of the prestigious institutions in India, IIT Guwahati. I worked with a company called ST Microelectronics as an engineer for 3 years, and then went for management from IIM Lucknow. But I think it was formative in its own senses because in IIT Guwahati, I got introduced to design. It was one of those institutes where engineers and designers study side by side. And even in IIM Lucknow, I had a few folks who were more creatively inclined, and that all got me excited about what design itself means. So even when I was doing that management studies, I drifted more towards design. I joined Mindtree. That's where my early corporate career as a management trainee as well as a designer began. So, starting as a consultant in an IT company, you learn a lot in the first few years. Travel around the world, mainly US and UK, work with many clients. And so, somewhere in that time, I also realized I am much more creatively inclined. So, I moved to other organizations as a design consultant now, not anymore as a business consultant. And all of those early career transitions took me to Standard Chartered Bank, where I worked primarily in Hong Kong, Taiwan, and China, creating design as almost a horizontal within the bank to help the bank think of new ideas, apply those principles to create new solutions for their clients, and eventually create ventures for them. And that's when COVID also happened. So that career took me to Singapore, where I then again thought maybe Standard Chartered Bank is giving me a lot, but maybe there is lots more to do with an IT consulting firm again. And that's where I think the reality hit me that what am I really doing? Why am I just chasing these corporate ventures and working more towards numbers and whatnot? There is maybe a higher calling in life. And why just wait for it? Why not just grasp it? And that's when I saw this opportunity with NUS, National University of Singapore, and I've joined them.
Okay, since you are a design thinking expert and you said that word quite a many times, just to address this to the broader audience, if I were to ask you, you have to explain what does a design thinking practitioner do to a 5 years old. What will you say?
Okay, that's super interesting. And I think not just 5 years old, sometimes it's very difficult to explain it to more of a mid-career professional because we have so many more notions in life. And I ask that question anytime I'm starting a design thinking course. I just ask how many of you design? And people start thinking and they say none of us. And they think design is done by someone else. So I tell them actually we are designing every day in and out. Each one of us is a designer in our own sense. For example, right now you're designing a podcast. You're thinking who your audience might be, what content they might like, how do you structure the whole flow. You're writing a message on WhatsApp, you're designing a message. You're thinking about who the intended recipient is, what message do you want to set, what tone do you want to send it in, should you send a smiley to make it a bit informal. So that's design. So design thinking essentially is kind of a framework created by designers for non-designers to think like designers. Now I know that's a handful or a mouthful of words. To put it simply, designers do many things of importance without even thinking about it. But for a non designer, to create it cannot just come by intuition sometimes. That's why it needs a structure. How do you then move through that structure? So that's why it says, hey, the first thing which you need is a beginner's mindset. Don't start thinking you already know everything. When you're designing something, think about whom you are designing for. You're not creating an artwork. An artwork is different, right? You can create an artwork for yourselves and it just remains maybe in your living room. But when you're creating a design, you're creating for someone else, you need to think like that person. And that needs you to remove what your mental blockages might be, the way you're thinking, the way you think that person might be thinking. And that's where it really begins. So that's why design thinking is literally that, which is start from beginner's mindset, go along this process of design thinking, and then maybe potentially come up with creative solutions, which might be useful for this person.
Okay, interesting. Any interesting design you have come across in recent years which made you like go like wow?
If I think about a most recent thing, might be just this coffee cup which I'm holding, right? So what I found unique about it is it's made up of material which is sustainable. Again, I haven't done research on how sustainable it might be, but it says it's made up of coffee husk. I can go one of these cafes which has a similar cup, and I can just put up my old one and pick up a new one.
Oh,
They have a
okay.
lifetime kind of a warranty.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
and they are in many cafes. So wherever I see these cups, I know that this cafe might be sharing similar values as what the cup holds. So think about it. I think that's what design is, right?
Yeah.
It's unique. It's thought provoking. It's giving me a sense
Mm.
individualism, and I can extend my own individuality to this coffee cup. And that's something which is great design according to me, which I've come
Great,
across.
great, wonderful. I love it. Okay, now coming back to your specific journey, you said that you saw an opportunity during COVID time in Singapore at NUS, and you also spoke about that you had this recurring questioning yourself that what am I doing? Am I chasing number? Was there any specific moment, or it was like over a period of time you were doing this self assessment and you finally decided this is it?
Yeah, great question. And I think any decision which we make today happens because of many things which might have happened in the
Mm,
past. So I think to keep it short, at the same time, you're giving a bit more context to it. I think I have always admired teachers. And at the
mm.
same time, every one of us sometimes think, hey, if I was a teacher, it would have been great. But it has
Yeah.
always two sides. One side is we think it's great because it gives us respect. We also think the teacher is in control. We can do whatever we want. That's how we always saw teachers, right, in classrooms. But there is also the opposite side, which is maybe a somewhat of fear and anxiety. Because we know as students also we used to pull the legs of teachers, make those commotions, be the bad students. So there's this always anxiety, like, will I be made fool of if I do something?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I think some of my teachers really influenced me, taught me that teaching itself can be a very rewarding profession. But then many teachers during my grad and undergrad, they have influenced me because they kept refining what they were teaching and the way they were teaching. And that influenced me because they had this persistence, which only a good teacher can have. And finally, very recently, I saw that, yes, you can do great work. You might be a great leader. And sometimes we say great leaders also create multiple values, right? You might have multiple teams working under you, delivering great things. But now, if you think about teachers, teachers are sometimes teaching these multiple leaders, and these multiple leaders are then going out into the world and doing many more things. So that multiplier effect is just amazing. It's something like the butterfly effect.
Yeah.
It's just a flutter right now in the classroom, but it might become so huge in the coming years. So that's what really motivated me.
Mhm.
But I think the new age academic lecturers and teachers like myself are very different. We interact with industry a lot more. We know what's exactly happening. At the same time, we are in tune with the researches which are happening.
Mhm.
So we
Mhm.
are kind of now bridges between academic world and the industrial world or the corporate world.
Right. And then you have the good view on both sides. So I want to ask you, how do you cope with, or how did you cope with this financial implications once you made this switch to academic
All
world?
right, so one great question to the other one, which some of my friends also ask. And so to answer that, I would again make you maybe reflect, and not just you, but even your listeners, right? There is no point in life, in your corporate life, when you get your paycheck and you say, this is enough. This looks like a good salary to me. Maybe it makes you happy on that day, but the next day you think, I wish I had got something higher.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we always run after numbers, right? We think, I wish this year I get 5%, 10%. I wish my bonus was much higher. Even when you get an increment letter, maybe you're happy for 1 month. After that, you think, next year I want to get even higher, or I'm
And then
going to
when you
do it.
compare, oh,
Yes.
you got 15, I only got 10.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a comparative thing also. So the point being, it's never enough. We'll ever earn enough to say, this is good enough, right? So I think that was one major point which drove me to say that it's okay to take a pay cut um, and work in a different profession,
Mm-hmm.
which gives you much more fulfillment in life. Then that far surpasses this salary cut which you're talking about. So it's no more than about making money. It's about seeing the joy in your students' eyes when they get this aha moment. I never knew about this. the joy which you get when one of your students comes back after 1 or 2 years and says, "Hey, you taught me something in the classroom. At that time, I didn't value it, but now I'm applying, and it's so amazing that I have been able to do X, Y, Z, and
Yeah.
it has led to this." That's the thing which you're looking for, and then you forget about what's in your bank balance because
Yeah.
this is what your bank balance is, what you're earning in life.
True.
Um,
True.
so I think combination of these two things has given me much more than the feeling of loss of that minor salary cut.
Okay. I mean, great. I'm assuming you are now living a much fulfilled life, but I want to touch upon your daily routine and lifestyle. How has it changed now? Or is there any difference, or is it as rigorous, as demanding in terms of working hours as it used to be in the corporate career?
True. So thinking on this one, I don't think it's ever easier.
Hmm.
And I don't think any career is easier than
Yeah.
the other. But I think what has majorly changed for me between a corporate life and the academic life is in a corporate life, you're thinking, I'm learning this new technology. How can I get more revenues for my team and my company, which can lead to more increments to me eventually? But I think the learning here in academic is very different. It's about how can I learn much more and then I can turn it into some kind of teaching in a classroom so that my students can learn much better in the future and they can create much better future solutions and artifacts. And that learning has really changed between the corporate and current academic life. Now I read lot many more things. I'm open to many more ideas. There is a lot more time spent with students and interacting with people to understand what their needs are, what they're looking for. So I'm not looking as to people as clients. I'm just looking to them as people who are willing to learn. So I would say the amount of time might be similar, but what I'm doing with that time has really changed. I think the last change which has happened in my life is corporate life, because of those targets of numbers which are very quantified and they are good in their own sense, also leads to some kind of stress levels. But the academic life, because you're not chasing numbers anymore, that stress goes away with, I would say, I don't have a word for it, so I'll just call it a positive stress.
Hmm, hmm, hmm,
So you
hmm.
know that you need to do something, but you are then creatively thinking of solutions, which actually gets you much more positively charged up and makes you wake up the next morning saying that, hey, let me do something, rather than waking up tired and say, oh my God, another day in office.
Yeah. But is there anything that you have carried as a habit from your corporate world into this academic world, like which you had to consciously stop yourself from doing, or which you have carried and it has helped you to differentiate yourself? Is there anything like that?
So a lot of things, I think our past defines our present and
Yeah.
future too. So maybe I'll just pick up maybe a positive and a negative. So I think the positive thing might be I used to interact with a lot of people in my work too, to find out what they're doing, what can I learn from them. So I think individually I was a very learning person. So I think I've carried that forward. I try to create those communities of practice and see how I can get more and more from everyone by interacting. So I think that's one positive thing. Negative, as I said, I think the biggest one again, I'll go down to chasing of numbers. When I moved to academic, one of the first things which a manager told me was, "Hey, stop looking at the number of students who are in the classroom. Think about what you are going to do with them." Right?
Right.
So the quality of learning surpasses the number of students who are in the classroom. Sometimes there might be just four or five, and you
Hmm.
might think, so being a corporate mindset person, you think, is it value enough to teach four or five? Should I
Yeah.
wait for the next date when I'll have 20 people in the classroom at least?
Right.
Um, but yeah, it's not the case. That's what we are doing here. We are never chasing numbers. We are chasing the quality of teachings and learnings in the classrooms.
Interesting. That's very interesting. So, since you're talking a lot about your students, I want to ask you, who are your students currently? Like,
Mm,
in terms of, let's say, are they mid career professionals, senior, or are
mm,
they those young, students?
sure.
Who are your students?
Yeah, so in NUS is quite a large academic institution with many practices. I'm part of something called NUS ISS. So in this, we mainly focus on executive education and mid-career
Okay.
change professionals. So yes, majority of our students are working professionals. They might be early career, mid career, or senior management. Sometimes we also do have master students. So if someone is doing masters in NUS, they might do something called stackable program, which is they can do a couple of certification programs with us. and
Okay.
then use those methods to do an actual project, a capstone project. So around 80% of them are working professionals with various levels of experience. Around 20% might be fresh grads or undergrads.
Okay. Do you observe any difference in learning behaviors of these two groups that you defined?
Absolutely. And we were just discussing some time back with our other faculty members. I think working professionals are amazing because they have already seen a lot of corporate life.
Hmm.
So when we talk about complex terms like service design, they at least know what service means, although they might not understand what service design means. But they know what does a service mean. For example, if they're working in a call center environment, they know how do a customer behave, what kind of queries they might get them, how do they we deliver products and solutions to them. The negative side of it is they then think we know it all, right? And
Yeah,
if you heard it in your own life, anytime you give them a new idea, a new structure, a new solution, they will say, we implemented it sometimes back, it doesn't
it
work.
did work.
Yeah. And why? It's okay. I have no time to explain, but believe me, I have more experience than you. So they always come with this baggage of experience, which
So,
doesn't work so well. And I'm not generalizing. There are a few folks who break these assumptions bracket too. On the other hand, fresh grads come with a very different pros and cons for themselves. So
hmm.
they have no experience. So that means they lack the vision of what a service itself might mean. So
Hmm.
we might say, assume you're a Grab. What kind of customer pain points will you think of? And they don't
Hmm.
know what Grab has seen, right? Or they don't even know what a corporate might have seen. So they usually tell a very individual retail experience.
Hmm.
They
Hmm.
usually don't know what a business environment might look
The
like.
consumer side of the things.
Yeah, yeah. They might not know what business operational issues might be and other issues might be. So their views are very different.
Okay.
But the best part, which is the advantage, is they don't carry any of that baggage of experiences. They try to come up with new ideas. And sometimes the best of the ideas actually comes from this crowd. So that's
Hmm.
why we try to
Okay.
make groups which has got youngsters with no experience and mid-career professionals so that one group can help them ideate, the other group can help them validate.
Interesting. So now let's move on to the advisory section. Ankush, we
Mhm.
have been talking a lot about your journey and
Yeah.
how it has been successful and fulfilling for you. So
Mhm.
I want to now touch down upon the fact that if, let's say, somebody is contemplating about this career transition of moving into academics, how they can do it, if they want to follow your path,
Yeah.
what would be the starting point and what steps can they take to go on to it full-fledged?
All right. Yeah, great question. And I'll again talk and think along the way. um, so I would say the first step would be, and I know many people keep saying, I want to become a teacher. I also want to contribute to academic in some ways. But I would say before going and making that leap, think really hard about why do you want to do it. It's not easy. As I said, it's got its own challenges. It looks very rosy from the outside, but it can be very tough. And if you're not a person who is motivated by these values which I talked about, then maybe you really need to reassess.
Mm-hmm.
What are you in for? Is this virtual thing which you've created in your mind of what a teacher might be, is it right or not? So I would say even talk to some of us, some of your friends who are teaching, understand from them what they're going through and what they think motivates them. And if you think you can be that person, then maybe take first steps forward. So if you've decided, then some of the first steps forward might be, as I said, academics has changed a lot. Academic institutions all around the world are looking for many more working professionals who can come in for teaching, who can share their knowledge in different ways. So you might be a lecturer like me, or you might join one of the research tracks, or you might just be an industry participant helping the students move along the way. So again, there are multiple of such roles possible. A lot depends on which geography you might be, what kind of academic institutions there might be. But these are all potential possibilities. So I think choose which path you want to take. Each one again is slightly different. Once you've chosen the path, the best way forward is to just go ahead and maybe either apply if they have job postings, or even talk to some other senior leaderships out there. So if you
Mm-hmm.
talk to some of the senior leadership, even at NUS or other institutions likewise, you will see there is a lot of interest. They will actually accept you with open arms because there's so much more which they want to learn from industries.
But is it like a proper interview process? You go through like 3, 4 rounds, and then is it like that?
Yes, it is. Yeah. So the
Okay.
process is similar to a corporate job. It's no
Okay.
different. The only thing which changes is what you are being assessed on. So obviously they know that you have a lot of industry experience. So there
Hmm.
are no questions about it.
Hmm.
I think that's the easiest part. But what they're also looking for is how good you are at teaching. So, for example, I also do a lot of calisthenics and yoga, and there are many people who are so good at yoga they can stand on their heads, they can stand on their hands, but they're very different as teachers because
Hmm.
teaching is a whole different
Yeah.
profession because you
Yeah.
don't need to stand on your head anymore. You
Yeah.
want
Yeah. Yeah.
your students to stand on their heads, right? And
True.
that's what they are looking for in their interview process. Some places it might be just interview based, but in some places they might also ask you to take a small module and see for themselves how you're teaching. You might
Okay.
even want
Like
to
a live.
record yourselves. Yeah.
Okay. 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 Okay.
Because as I said, teaching itself has changed a lot, right? You
Yeah.
might be talking and you might be a great uh, talker. You can talk for hours, but academic institutions are not looking for that anymore.
Hmm. Hmm.
They're
Hmm.
looking
Hmm.
for people who can drive practice-based learning. So you do that. So I think and learn of those methods and then see if you can use those methods in teaching by your own. So those will also be some of the steps. And lastly, as I said, I think practice it. If you cannot, then you mentioned tuitions might
Yeah.
not be a bad idea to start off with. If you're getting no one, it can also start with your own kids and kids
Hmm.
around you
Hmm.
because they are the best feedback loop for you. If you think
Hmm.
you can teach kids, you can also teach adults.
True, I absolutely agree. But so you can literally walk in with zero experience on teaching and apply and then see how it goes. You don't need to have a prior teaching experience.
You don't need to have a prior teaching experience. As I said, I think the primary criteria are you should have at least a good industry experience. You should have a motivation towards the field itself.
Right.
And lastly, you should be comfortable in this setting, which is very different from a corporate
Right.
setting.
So speaking about that, and you mentioned that the academic world has its own challenges. So I
Hmm.
want to ask you what particular challenges you have seen in this world, which were, let's say, non-existent in corporate, or they were existing, but maybe in different magnitudes. So can you touch upon that?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I think the biggest challenge in academic world is you are almost a thought leader who's teaching others. You can experiment. There is no harm in experimentation, but you need to be really sure that what you're teaching holds ground and has got foundation.
Hmm.
And that's why you really need to be rooted with the research side of academic world. Whereas in corporate world, and you might see it again in many places. I'm not generalizing. Some people might just challenge me. We just jump onto a new idea and we are sometimes not sure if it's valid enough or not. So, for example, Gen AI, the most recent one, everyone jumped on it, every business jumped on it. There was a very, very fun one. Again, taking my coffee cup example, people say coffee cups were not selling. So now you can say it's a Gen AI coffee cup and it will sell more, right? Which works well in corporate settings, which is something new comes up, you quickly learn about it, you implement it, and you start selling something new.
Hmm.
In academic world, it needs much more thorough research. So I can't simply talk about Gen AI in a classroom setting until unless I have tested out some of those tools, I have tested out some of those methods, or I have read about those methods, and I know that they have got some kind of research backing, or some research has been happening. And even when I'm teaching, I need to tell them both the sides of it. I can't just be telling them one side.
Right.
That's also the ethical side of academics, which is you need to make sure that you're giving them a tool in hand
Hmm.
and make them aware of both the
How they
advantages
use
and
it?
disadvantages. Yeah,
Okay, and how they use it, that's on their own. That's left on their own.
that's on their own. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
However, that's where somewhere you're not just telling what tools are there, but you're also making them aware of the double-edgedness of the sword.
But still, from what I gauged from you, that you can't have a polarizing, strong opinion when you are in academics. Is that true?
You can have an opinion as long as you're also open to discussing it with your students.
Right.
And
Right.
again, I think this is more of my personal opinion. What we are trying to do is we are trying to have an open forum. You can challenge me and I can challenge you, and let's learn from those challenges. And that's how all the research is also done, right? You look at any research which is being done, any PhD thesis, they are looking at what research has been done. And then they're saying, can we challenge this or can we extend it in certain ways? That's what academics is in the sense. And whatever we learn from those challenges or extensions is what we then teach in the classrooms.
So, Ankush, moving on, these are some great insights, but would you like to clear any myths surrounding academia, what it is and what it is not?
All right. Good one. So myths, you might see a teacher one time a week in the classroom and you might say, hey, this teacher is living such a chill life, only once a week work. But the work is really done behind the scenes. A lot of work is done not in the classrooms, but much before it. And I don't have any ratios in mind, but typically what I've seen is even for, let's say, a day's teaching, you might need to prepare yourselves at least 2 weeks in advance. You need to think about who the students might be, go through their profiles, try to understand what they might want to learn from this course. You try to see how best to customize the course to their needs, how best to think of applications of these, maybe bring in more contextual examples from the students. So that's what takes a lot more time. So I would say it's a lot more time which is spent in preparations. There are two things which are myth busters, maybe. The first is we as academicians or teachers, actually we don't know everything, right? We have read researches and other things, and we are ready to be challenged. In fact, we encourage challenges in classrooms. As I said, much of the learning actually happens in these discussions and challenges. So yes, teachers don't know everything, and you can actually teach the teachers so that they can make the future classes much, much more enriching. And the second is no, it's not that teachers have everything under control. They have a structure in mind, most probably. They know that at a high level, this is the message which I have to teach. But there are a lot of things which you have to do on the go. It's like you need to be that person who can change things on the go, who can interact with people, who can actively listen to what they're saying as students, and then see what can I do so that they understand my teachings much better. And the third myth, I think, which was not exactly a myth, was do teachers earn much lesser? Yes, as I said, that's not exactly a myth. Yes, they might be earning much lesser than a corporate world, but I'll bust it in a different way, saying that the value which you get out of it is so much more than what you can get in corporate life. So we have effectively what 30, 40 years of work life. If at the end of it, if you look back at it and you say, okay, what I have done is maybe build these 5 products which have done really good, and they might be super products, right? Or services. But as teachers, you think about, I maybe build these 1,000 students in my journey who have now done 5 products each, and that makes it 5,000 products, right? Which is so much more, and maybe that's what I'm looking for. And if that's what you're looking for, this is a career for you.
Right.
Yeah, so that's where it is like.
Okay, very, very interesting, Ankush. We are almost towards the end. Now, I just want to ask you, what are your future plans? Do you want to stick around in academia, or, it's like never say never, who knows how it unfolds? Have you given any thoughts about your future?
I haven't, although I do futures thinking too. So I have a couple of scenarios in mind. So I do want to stick now with academia for quite some time, see what researches are going on, maybe actively participate in some of them, and then bring them to classrooms. Maybe head towards some kind of a PhD thesis or something if possible. But in real long term, I think I do want to be a very active bridge between academic and corporate world.
I know we are at the end, but I want to ask this question. Do corporates come with a problem statement which they want universities help?
Yeah.
Okay.
So most of the corporates do come up with some kind of problem statement. I think the challenge with sometimes corporate problem statements are they are already thinking about what the solution might be. So as again academic folks, we try to see if we can change the nature of the problem statement itself and see if we can really do research and come up with multiple possibilities rather than just one solution. So that's where we try to work more towards problem definition side rather than only then solutioning.
Great. Interesting. Thank you very much, Ankush. If anybody wants to reach out to you, if they're aspiring to move into academic world, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, Facebook. I have my email ID. Maybe I'll share as part of this podcast. So drop me a note. Happy to have a virtual conversation or a coffee chat anytime. I'll learn from you, and while you can learn from me.
Great. Thank you very much, Ankush. This was a very insightful conversation for me personally as well. I learned a lot about this
Thank
world
you.
that you are operating in.
Awesome. Thank you. It was my pleasure.